Sometimes you just gotta make them bite.
Oh, there he is. Look at that. Great big one.
This spot's gotta have fish. Got him. Good one, boy. Good one.
There we go. There, got him. Nice fish.
That did not take too long.
So what's with the fish? They just ain't biting. Even for the best anglers, fishing can get tough at times, no matter where you fish or what species you pursue. On good days, fish may try to chew the paint off your lures.
That feels like a good one, Jim.
On tough days, it's more like watching paint dry. One thing's for sure, you can't force fish into making attitude adjustments. Yet even under the toughest conditions, you can adjust your tactics to match their attitudes, especially when they're not in the most positive of moods.
There he is.
Lure selection is the key. Some lures are great for covering water and triggering strikes from aggressive fish. Casting spinnerbaits or rattlebaits for bass, trolling crankbaits for walleyes, or burning bucktails for muskies are good examples. Fishing quickly allows more fish to see your lures, increasing your odds of catching them if they're willing to chase them down and strike.
There we go.
Nice. Got another one. That's a big one.
That's a big one.
If they don't respond to aggressive tactics, however, it's time for a change. This usually means fishing smaller lures at a slower pace to tempt reluctant fish into biting. Today, on The Edge, we examine the delicate balancing act between triggering and tempting. First, we go after deep water crappie, using a surprisingly aggressive method to trigger strikes.
Speed fish in deep water. The Jigging Rap is a great tool.
Then we slow down our approach to tempt pre-spawn smallmouth bass into biting, using light line and finesse lures to tickle their fancy and entice results.
Reaction baits like a jerk bait that works so good when the water is crystal clear, we hardly get a bite on it. We really got to slow down now with the tube, the grub, and the hair jig. That's what's working.
Tempting, teasing, crashing, smashing. You may think you choose the right lure for the day, but in the end, the fish do.
James, this has been a good day, I'll tell you. Wow.
Closed captioning provided by Fishoflage. Crappies are notorious sight feeders that often examine baits for long periods of time before reluctantly striking. But that's not always the case. Under the right conditions, crappies can be surprisingly aggressive despite their tentative nature. Baits that trigger strikes can turn nibblers into gnashers in nothing flat.
Yeah, maybe it's a walleye. I'm not sure if it's a
They're
crappie.
big
It's a
crappies
big
here,
one.
I'm telling you.
Nope, walleye.
Big
Oh,
crappie.
big
Look at
crap.
that.
Look at
Look
the
at that.
size of that one.
Look at that. Get them in the boat, Bubba.
Yeah.
Lift them in.
Look at that guy there, beautiful crappie. You know, crappies like this in reservoirs and natural lakes really make predictable seasonal movements. And right now, Al and I are really looking at a real prime time, late summer, early fall, when these fish set up in their wintering areas, and it could be just a phenomenal bite.
When you pop that little jig, it's amazing to see that Jigging Rap, how it darts off the bottom. I mean, that thing just goes zing, zing, zing in different directions. And they truly like it.
tight on the bottom, 33. You're getting pretty close to that that GPS coordinate that I put down when you hooked that last fish.
Something ought to be given here. There he was. There's something got to be given there soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Something had to give there. There was too many of them. Way too many of them. Look at that. Look at that sucker. Oh man. I like when you gotta lip a crop. These little hooks are amazing. You gotta watch that they don't hook you. But it is an amazing little crappie bait. Am I still sitting on him?
Nope, you've blown off of them a little bit.
So tight. Look at the size of those things. America's favorite fish, huh? They're lucky I'm not in the eating mood.
You know, that's one thing you look at most of the time when you're finding fish in deep water is usually sort of a slow process because you got to get the bait up and down. But this thing, I mean, it's like a rocket to the bottom. Look at that, you know, let her drop. The biggest thing is trying to maintain a boat control so you're not moving that quickly. We're trying to stay as vertical as possible. There we go, I just got down there. We're in about 34 feet and we have fish about 3-4 feet off the bottom. But the thing is what we're doing is you'll notice that you're actually fishing this bait relatively aggressively. They look like crappies right there. Whoop, there's one.
Got him?
Boy, you can see them on the depth finder as soon as you come through those pods of them.
Looks like a good one again.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, he's pulling
Boy,
good.
the bull.
They're fun, ain't they?
But these are
They're
really
bulls. You got
really
one of them real
whopper
donkeys
crappies.
there. One of them real piggies.
Oh, look at the size of these
that
guys.
one, man.
Look at these things.
You gotta net them, Bob. You gotta lip them.
I know, look at that thing. Look at that beautiful crappies, no question about it.
In natural lakes, summertime crappies often swim in and along weed edges in small schools spread throughout the lake. As water temperature drops into the 50-degree range in fall, they begin their migration towards wintering areas. At this time, they often congregate along sharp drop-offs that dump into lake basins where the hard bottom transitions into soft mud. To initially find them, we'll move along these structures with the big motor, placing down waypoints wherever we see fish on our Hummingbird. Then we fine-tune our search with the trolling motor, concentrating around these waypoints.
Electronics is a big part of deep water fishing for any different species of fish. You know, for crappies, it's really the ticket. And what Al's been doing is sort of moving along here really, really slowly with the iPilot. But what we're going to do is we actually have a couple of different really cool features on this trolling motor that can really be sort of interesting for this type of fishing situation. I've got one. I told you I was going to say you could see the fish right there. But one of them is a feature called Spot Lock, where when you get on a really big pod of them, you can actually just hit a Spot Lock feature, and the trolling motor will literally physically hold us on that exact coordinate. But some of these fish are actually spread out along the edge of a break line, and we can use this other feature, which we're going to use, which is called Record a Track. And what we do is actually set it in and out along the length of the structure that we're fishing, and you can actually have the boat literally move back and forth between those different waypoints or those coordinates. Come on, buddy, get back down there.
You just look at that head. I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing. He did the recorder track. We set the track through the pods of fish. What I got here? That didn't feel like a crappie. Look at that. How's that a giant walleye, huh? Are you impressed with that walleye? Walleye of all walleyes. Look at that guy. As I was talking about my recorded track, the unit's doing everything. The exact track that he laid down is what it's doing. He set the speed that we want for the wind and the depth for the baits we're fishing, and we'll hit these 3 pods of fish and go right through them and just track right along. Hands and foot free. Amazing, amazing.
Oop, there he is.
Were you holding it?
Yeah, I don't
5
know.
feet off the
We were
bottom?
sort of moving, and I wasn't.
That's a little better one. I can tell the way that rod
Yeah.
is pulling.
Huh.
There's some big ones in here, Jim.
Yeah, I don't know what this guy here is. Boy, That's a good one, whatever he is. Nice one. Look at
that.
Look at the size of
man.
him. Boy, them are big crappies.
Yeah,
Holy
look at him.
mackerel.
Oh, that's a whopper.
That
Bob.
guy is so big that, oh, look at that boat. What a beautiful crappie. No question about it. For deep water jig fishing, it's a really hard technique to beat. No question about it. Something relatively simplistic too. And to really speed fish in deep water, the jigging rap is a great tool.
If elusive slab crappies evade your fishing efforts, Crappie Logic details the proper rigging, bait, tackle, and fishing strategies for locating and catching these calico beauties all year long. Hey, it's part of our Angling Edge instructional DVD collection, available at anglingedge.com.
When fish are in a positive mood, it's usually because positive things are happening in their environment. Food is abundant. Weather conditions are stable or improving. Light levels are optimum for feeding success. Throw a bad cold front into the equation, however, and a positive mood can suddenly turn negative, grinding fish activity to a standstill. There isn't much you can do to improve a fish's mood.
Oh, got it, Jim. Yeah.
You can, however, adjust your presentation to suit a sour mood, converting a tough bite into sweet success.
After a long winter, smallmouth swimming a grub is a exciting thing. Look at that baby. Huh? You know what? I dream about the early season smallmouth bite all winter long. Now, over the years, I spent a lot of time down south in the winter. And I fished all over the Florida scene, the Texas scene, recently Southern California. And then I watched the weather, and sometime in April, when the ice goes out in and around my hometown in Brainerd, Minnesota, I head back. My brand new Lund is all rigged out. I got all the new electronics, trolling motor, my big Merc on it. Me and Jimmy usually pack our bags, grab the cameras, and head to South Dakota. He's got another fish to do a little smallmouth fishing.
Oh, a little bit better one, Al. Come here. You know, when you're looking at smallmouth bass, one thing that's really, really critical is understanding the strike zone of these particular fish. And they're really super moody. I mean, right now, the water temperature is pretty cool and it's in spring. And I caught this fish on a hair jig. But there's a wide range of different baits that you could potentially use for these fish depending on their mood.
We fish for smallmouth bass from ice out in spring to freeze over in fall and anywhere in between. Realistically, there's a wide variety of environmental factors that can determine the size of a fish's strike zone. Strike zone is the distance at which a bass, or any fish for that matter, is willing to move and strike a bait.
Whoop, there he is, see him? Oh, there he is, look at that. Great big one too, ooh.
Water clarity is a big one. In dark water with limited visibility, strike zones shrink. Fish in dark water tend to hug the bottom and often hold tight to cover. In clear water, the increase in vision dramatically opens the distance at which a fish can see and is willing to run down food or your lure.
Oh yeah, look at him.
Water temperature accordingly. In cold water, strike zones tend to shrink. Warm water, strike zones increase. The abundance and type of forage can increase or decrease the strike zone as well. Fish feeding on minnows are often more willing to move far and fast to feed, while fish tuned in on eating bugs will simply not move that far or fast. Most anglers know that weather can have a dramatic influence on fish feeding patterns. In general, stable warming trends tend to increase strike zone size, while an intense cold front can shrink the strike zone to nothing. Good anglers experiment with size, speed, color, action of baits to match the fish's present feeding mood.
Oh, look at that fish. You know, every year we come here and do this, we always got to make some kind of an adjustment. Boy, is that fish a big one, huh? To local weather and water conditions. One year you come, the water is crystal clear. This year, as an example, it's very dirty, very high. Reaction baits like a jerk bait that works so good when the water is crystal clear, we hardly get a bite on it. We really got to slow down now with the tube, the grub, and a hair jig. that's what's working. You're always making adjustment. It takes you usually a half a day to figure everything out.
It's sort of an interesting spot because you have the weeds out in back of us, and then you have harder bottom that transitions into the boulders on the shoreline in here. But you can really see it good on the side imagery.
You know, the flat we're on here, we've got probably almost a quarter of a mile of water that these smallmouths are coming on, major spawning areas, but there's a lot of fish coming up here now. And as I'm fishing down this thing, we're looking at about 2 foot changes. And sometimes it'll break way out like this in about 4 or 5 foot of water, way out with scattered rocks on it, and I'll grab that grub and throw that grub across it. And then it'll dip in a little bit, and you only got a 2 foot roll, but it'll turn back into a pocket and get a little more vertical against the walls. And I get in those little pockets, and I'm grabbing the tube and getting bit on the tube and slowing down a little bit. That seems to be working right now pretty good. Oh, got another one. Oh, got another one. Right off of that.
Hogging me.
This is a tube fish, just cross. I'm swimming it as if you were, you know, fishing that grub, but I'm dragging it on the bottom. Yeah.
That's a big one there.
Yeah. As the afternoon goes, you know,
Wow,
we get a few more of these babies coming in. And, you know, one thing that has absolutely always amazed me, all the years we've been doing this, is she a big gal, look at this. The thing that amazes me is how quickly some of the fish in the population, how shallow some of these big brown bass will get, and how quick they'll be there. I've had them up in shallow water 4 to 5 days after ice out. Big brownies like this, obviously that's got nothing to do with spawning.
Right now the water's relatively dark, the water's relatively cold, and the fish are just coming up in spring. So their strike zone is relatively small at this particular time. You know, I'm taking this little 16th ounce VMC hair jig, just pitching it out in back of the boat or out away from the boat, and just sort of twitching it. And it's moving very, very slow. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you know, throughout the summer months in a real clear water lake and on the Great Lakes, I know for a fact that smallmouth bass will travel, you know, 25 foot to hit a bait. So it gives you the range of how you have to use your varying lures in your tackle box to trigger one of these fish into biting. You know, their strike zone can really change dramatically throughout the course of the season.
The feeding mood of all fish can change dramatically on a daily, weekly, and seasonal basis. For consistent success, your lure selection has to be in tune with their feeding mood. Today we're fishing sluggish fish, just moving in from deep wintering areas to shallow flats where they will eventually spawn in the next couple of weeks. Slow and subtle seems to be the ticket for the day. Slow-moving tubes, grubs, and hair jigs are good options anytime you're fishing for inactive smallmouths with a small strike zone. For aggressive fish with a large strike zone, minnow baits like X-Wraps, spinner baits, crankbaits, and rattle baits come into play. Speed and erratic behavior is a great way to trigger strikes when fish are willing to move fast and far to feed.
Oop, there's one now.
Topwater like X-Pops and X-Props have a time and place. For bottom bouncing in deep water, drop shotting and football heads come into play. Angling success seasonally is all about lots of choices and experimentation. The key is to read the conditions and let the fish tell you what they want.
It's really fun, that hair jig. It's sort of interesting, you know. You get a rod like this, and it's such a subtle presentation, and a lot of people, you know, bass anglers don't understand the power of hair jigging. At certain times, it's almost amazing on how good it can be, and you could be fishing, when these fish get really negative, the smallmouths can be very, very tough to catch. You know, with largemouth bass, if you know right where they're at, you dead stick a tube, you can catch them. And for smallmouth bass, a tube, that isn't subtle enough. When they're really inactive, boy, it's hard to beat a little hair jig. I'm serious, it's a really hard to beat. A little tiny little hair jig, just moving really, really slow, twitching it, just flip it out and back of the boat. It's a relatively simple bait to fish.
You know, you think spring smallmouth fishing, should just load the boat all the time, and it can be fantastic. There's days if you're watching your weather, water conditions, you're keeping an open mind, you know a little bit about the mood of the fish, pay attention to the strike zones, you should almost always have a good day. Even when fronts come in spring, there's still some fish to be had, but boy, these fish can be, on some days, weird. They're in, out, they're up, down, and their moods are changing like this. You've got to be adjusting constantly. But when you get it right, you can catch fish like this fairly consistent for a long, long period of time.
Hey, for more detailed information or to purchase any products you've seen on this show, go to lindermedia.com.
You know, when I first got into God's Word on a regular basis, one of the things that really had an impact on me was knowing that God loves me, cares about me, and wants the best for me. He's not up there with a big stick in his hand waiting for you to make a mistake and goes, whack, gotcha. That's not how a loving, caring God operates. He gives you every opportunity to come to Him with whatever the needs are in your life and to seek Him according to His Word. You know, there's a lot of scripture that talks about God's love. One of the most common is in John 3:16. Goes on to say, God so loved the world that gave His only begotten Son. Whoever believes in Him should not perish and have everlasting life. But there is numerous scriptures that talk about God's love for you. And He's trying to reach us on a daily basis through people, time, circumstances, because He truly does love you. When that becomes real to you and burns into your heart, your life will be changed. Hey, from all of us here at The Edge, you have a good, safe fishing season. We'll see you on the water.
Hey, I sure want to take an opportunity to thank all our sponsor partners for making this show possible. And if you like what you see, let them know and support them. For more information, check us out at anglingedge.com, Facebook, or the YouTube channel. Hey, thanks for watching.